So Andre is not only a professional colleague of mine, but a friend, and he and I have been connected as peers, friends, and educators for over 10 years. Can you believe that, Andre? When I thought about it, I thought I didn't realize that. So Andre has been in education for 15 years. He's a veteran educator who started his career in social services. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. After that, he became a cross-categorical special education teacher and taught at the high school and middle school levels. He then pursued an administrator position and became a degreed administrator, working as an AP and a middle school principal. He currently leads the Racine Alternative Learning Center as the director. Andre and I first connected as doctoral candidates at Cardinal Stritch University and have stayed connected ever since then. He also is a husband and father of a beautiful boy, and I'm proud to call him a friend. Welcome.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I think it's a great opportunity, and I want to thank the Institute for Urban Education at UW-Milwaukee for putting on this panel today. We have a lovely group of women here to talk to you really about their experiences, and specifically in our school district here in Racine Unified. But what they'll be talking about is something that can be really broadcast across the nation from an educational standpoint. We all know that parents are going through a lot of what we'll be talking about today. Some of these parents will be hitting on race and bias issues and misconceptions about them and their families that they've experienced, specifically around trust with teachers that they've engaged with, or their children have had to engage with over the course of their child's career. The great thing about the panel that we have here today is that their children are going to really go across the spectrum of the K-12 environment. So this is just not an elementary or middle school or a high school experience that you'll be hearing about. These families will be able to touch on their experiences across the K-12 dynamic. So I'm glad to have this group of individuals here with us today. What we're going to do is we'll have each one of the ladies connected today. Gabby Pfeiffer, Tanisha Nguyen, Michaela Young, and Leanna Johnson will all speak to you today. We also have the pleasure of having Michaela Young here, who was a student for us here at RUSD and who was also a recent graduate of RUSD. So I want to congratulate Michaela on her completion of Racine Unified School District and wish her good luck in her endeavors moving forward. So really, without further ado, I want to be able to give each one of these women an opportunity to really tell their story and their experience of how they've engaged, their kids have been engaged, that they've engaged with their educators. And I think if you're out there and you're a pre-service educator, this is significant to the impact that you will potentially be making on students and families as you get into the profession of education. So without further ado, I want to move forward with our first panelist guest, Gabby Pfeiffer, and let Gabby begin to really tell her story and some of her experiences as a parent of a student here in Racine Unified School District. Gabby?
Yes. Well, my name is Real Pfeiffer. I have actually two students here within RUSD. I have a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old. One of my children is special ed, so he's enrolled in a special education program that they have. My overall experience is kind of different because what it has been for one, it hasn't been for the other. For my 9-year-old, it hasn't been too bad. I guess I would say it kind of been a well-rounded, decent level experience. My other experience for my other son, my 8-year-old who's in special education, honestly, it's been kind of an emotional nightmare for us. Not the best, but I do believe that we can make some changes and get to the place where they need to be. which is why I still have him enrolled in RUSD. He suffers from ADHD. And when he first started with RUSD, his diagnosis was unknown. So you would see him and think like, oh, like, yeah, he's just a regular average kid, not like playing, talking, socializing, hanging out with his friends. You wouldn't think pretty much anything about this kid. It probably wasn't until his first grade year where we really started to see the change in my child. You seen like the behaviors, the difference between him at home and then versus him at school. We noticed like him falling behind, like not catching on to topics and things at, I guess a person would say, average speed. And that's when we started the process. And that's when everything started. I feel that because people had that assumption prior to his diagnosis that, oh, like he's a complete kid, it kind of like set him back more, because you would think he would know everything and you could just hand him like this work and think like he's at a first grade level and he's really at like a kindergarten level. You know what I mean? So that did transpire into the classroom. And that's where we found out the behaviors were coming from. Is from those assumptions. Now, fast forward, he's going to the third grade, which I'm nervous about, but we'll see what this year brings. Last year, it was another struggle. I was grateful enough to have a better teacher that year. She was very hands-on. She understood Aaron because her own child suffered from the same disorder that my child had. So she really gave her all. She went like above and beyond for him when it came down to making sure like he understood things. So I don't know what this year will bring, honestly, but you know, we dealt with a lot of things. People assuming things and having this idea that he's just fine, or that, oh, he's just, excuse my French, it's just like a bad African-American student, not knowing what's going on with Aaron. It's been hard. We put him in counseling. I've been in counseling for it. Sleepless nights, stressful days, just a lot. It's been a lot. And I'm hoping like, okay, we can get there, RUSD can get there, make these changes. But his first connection that he had with the school was with the teacher, and it was with that level of trust. And he got to the point, where that trust was broken. And once that trust was broken with my son, which is where I learned, like, my son is a person that's super huge on relationships. His trust and how he feels towards you will, determine the work he does on top of like the disability. But we realized like once that trust was like broken with him, it was just like complete night and day. Everything that they got at school, from honestly, like from the behaviors to just him doing one thing for one person but not for the other. People just had like these assumptions about him, like he's just an okay kid, and like he's not. We dealt with a lot at home, homelessness, just anything that you could think of. But a lot of people didn't see that. They just seen the behaviors. So I guess my piece of advice for people who are entering the classroom, who are like new to the classroom, is just remembering that every child, despite, what it appears on the outside, they have that backstory to them, and really being mindful, of that relationship and what that child may have going on. Some behaviors and things like that are undiagnosed, and parents don't know what to do. They don't know where to start, and it's important that sometimes like that educator, that teacher goes above and beyond to give that parent, the resources that he or she needs to help, because it's not necessarily like that us against them. I've been presented with that attitude and that standpoint for so long. Like, it's to the point to now where, like, I'm tired, but I'm like, I'm still going to keep advocating for my child because that's my child. And I know that's what I have to do. But just, you know, just being open to that child that, okay, this is a child in front of me, but just like I have a story, this child has a story. I don't know what happened yesterday, but I'm really here to educate and to help, and that relationship and that trust is one thing like that I would recommend, like, to never be broken. Honestly, because it's hard to lose with a lot of, well, it's hard to gain and easy to lose with a lot of children, especially those with special needs and that are high risk and that show behaviors. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. But we look forward to continuing on this journey and just hoping for the best this year. He's ready to come back to school. And so, like, we like, okay, it's going to be a new year. Let's get it started. Let's get going. You know, he's ready to learn.
Thank you, Gabby. I really appreciate you being honest and giving us really that very detailed and emotional view of what your journey has been like here in RUSD, but specifically as a parent of a child of color, but also as a child with a disability, which I can 100% understand as I deal and tackle with the same situation with my own child. So thank you very much. We really appreciate hearing your story. We'll be following back here after we get the other panelists through this process. So if you stay with us, Gabby, I appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be some people who have some questions for you. Myself, I'll have some questions for you as well, okay? So thank you, Gabby. I really appreciate it. We're going to move on to our next panelist, Tanisha Nguyen. Tanisha will we'll tell you a brief story about herself. She'll have a lot to say, I'm sure. But what I can say is that Tanisha is the mother of four and of four graduates in RUSD. And she's done that all as a single parent. I have to put that out there because she's a hard-working woman. And just like Gabby, Tanisha is also an employee of Racine Unified School District. So there's that added component that they're just not parents. They also work for us. And so while they're helping and working for the benefit of other students, their own children are still experiencing some of these things as they go through their journey and through education here in RUSD. So Tanisha, are you out there?
Yes, I am. Hello, hello.
Tanisha, let's give us a little something, Tanisha.
Okay, so hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. I want to start by saying, yes, I do have four children that have graduated from the district, so I'm extremely happy and proud of that. I have two different experiences within RUSD, one as a parent and then one as an employee of the district. One of the things I can speak on is that raising my children, I have my daughter graduated in 2013, my son 2016, and then twins in 2020. And so when Titan and Eddie were in school, I always found myself getting more calls about him than her. And then when the twins got to school, the same thing happened. So my concern was always like, why do I always get more calls for the boys than I did for the girls? And there was no difference because they were all raised by the same person. I instilled the same values in all four of my children. So why is it that I'm getting more calls for the young men than I am for my daughters? I will never forget what a teacher said to me once. And she said, it must be hard with just raising them all by yourself. I mean, no man, it's just you. I don't know how you do it. And I just smile like I pray and I have the strength from God. That's how I do it. And I didn't take that as a compliment. I kind of thought that was like a dig at me a little bit. But the experiences that I had were always very trying to choose my words wisely. It never made sense to me that I was receiving this type of treatment as a parent. It's like, do you not understand the struggles that I have as just a single parent every day, waking my children up and getting them to school? And now that they're here, it's almost like you're trying to break down what I built up in my children. You're not going to tell my child. A teacher called my child an ass once. You're just an ass. And I'm like, how are you going to call my child these types of things? Like, I'm instilling value and motivation and encouragement and hard work into my children. Yet when they leave my home and come into your building, you're breaking down everything that I built up inside of them. Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to crush my child and break my child's spirit? Why? My son, who graduated in 2016, he made it, and I was so proud of him because he struggled. He had a really, really hard time graduating. And I remember when he went to a particular guidance counselor, and she told him that she didn't see him graduating. I don't think it's possible. I mean, you can try, but I just don't see it happening. And he came home and he was so broken. And it took everything in my spirit to build my child back up, because you're supposed to guide him and help him. And how dare you tell my child what he will not be? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I instilled in my child from day one, he could be anything he puts his mind to. And you think you're going to look him in his face and tell him what he's not going to be? And the day my son graduated, I will never forget, I was screaming and cheering. And I remember I looked at him and I seen him look in the audience and like make a face. And, you know, like a yeah kind of like face. And I'm like, okay. So when he comes back around, I was like, dude, who was that? He was like, oh, that was her. And then she wanted to give him, oh my God, I knew you could do it. And no, you didn't. You were tempted to break down my child. Another thing I experienced as a parent is when I would call and have these conversations, the treatment that I would get, the way I would be being spoke to was like, you were better than me. Like I was less than a mother or less than a person because I just so happened to be a woman of color with 4 children. Don't degrade me and don't downgrade, don't speak to me like I'm uneducated, like I'm an ignorant woman because I have 4 children. You don't know my struggle or my story, but you're going to take what society feeds your mind as to what a single Black woman is supposed to look like and as to what my household is supposed to look like. And you say things to me. I was writing my kids' information down and she says, oh, they all have the same last name. I'm sorry. What did you expect? I apologize, you know, and it was just that comment. And it was like, don't speak down, don't speak beneath me. You're not beneath me because of the situation and or the circumstances that you feel should plague me and prevent my children from being successful. Going from a parent in the district and getting phone calls and getting things like that to an employee of the district is a totally different ball game. Because the minute I became an employee of the district in 2013, all of a sudden I'm, oh, Miss Nguyen, how can we help you? Oh, Miss Nguyen, what type of services can we provide for you? Oh, Miss Nguyen, these types of things. But before, I was just her over there. Now that I'm part of your team, now you have respect for me. Why didn't I have that respect before I became an employee of the district prior to 2013? Where was that respect then? As a young mother who needed help, who needed assistance, who was looking for some type of guidance and care and support, where did that come from? And then once I became an employee of the district, I could see teachers treating children with such disrespect. Okay, she is tardy every day for class. Why is she tardy every day? Have you taken the time to sit down and talk to her and figure out what circumstances or situations are plaguing her to cause her to have the situation? No, you're not. Because when you look at her, you just see Black. You see a Black child that is acting out, that is rebellious, but you've never taken the time to sit this child down and find out what is the core, the root as to what is causing them a problem. Let me just read something for you real quick. It's a poem called "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil." I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because we ain't got no lights. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. Really? That's what you do? That should not be your concern. That should not be your concern. I've seen so many teachers kick kids out of classrooms once I made it to middle school because they didn't have a pencil, or they didn't have a folder, or they didn't have a notebook. But do you realize what it took for that young man and that young woman to even get up this morning and make it to school? We got to do better. We got to do better for our kids, for this new generation. And it hurts me to say I'm thankful that all of my kids have completed their education with RUSD, but I can't be proud because I know so many other kids are still being left behind, and there's still so much more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanisha. I truly appreciate you. I've said this to Tanisha a lot of times, and I've known Tanisha, and I like to, just be honest with the individuals who are out there listening to this panel. And this is something that I don't think anyone, including the folks who brought us together today to hear this, knows that Tanisha is my biological cousin. And the reason I feel that that is extremely valuable for people to know is that although I am the director of Racine Alternative Learning here in Racine Unified School District, although I used to be the head principal at Starbuck Middle School, where Tanisha was actually working before I got there, her path to where she is today has been very different from mine. And her experiences have been extremely different from mine. And really, I believe the only thing that differs from the way we were raised and the way we were brought up is the fact that she grew up mainly here in Racine, and I grew up in a town a little bit north of here called Kenosha. But other than that, we grew up very much the same way. And to hear her speak to her experiences as a mother in the district, along with my little cousin who's about to come on, her daughter Michaela, is concerning to me as an educator, because to me personally, have witnessed the things that Tanisha speaks of. I've been with her when she's gotten some phone calls about her children that concerned her significantly. In the way in which she was spoken to by employees of the district who may not have known that she was an employee of the district, but just treated her simply as a African-American mother or of a disobedient child. So I'm really happy that Tanisha is a part of this conversation, because we are cut from the same cloth, and yet we're so far apart in so many different things. So again, I want to thank you, Tanisha, for being here and speaking your truth. It means a lot to me as your cousin, that you could come out here and vocalize that. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Tanisha's daughter and recent graduate of RUSD, Michaela Young. Michaela, I want to give you the floor. I am going to say this, that Michaela is one of my favorite cousins, okay? I love her more than I love her mother. So I love Michaela. She's an extremely intelligent young lady, and I'm so glad for you guys to be able to hear from her today. Michaela, the floor is yours.
Hi. I'm just a little nervous, just disregard that. But as a student, it's different because, we're living in the moment, as of parents who are just hearing what the teacher tells them, So as a student, I feel like teachers don't understand that students learn differently. We don't all learn the same. We don't all consume the information and what we're learning at the same pace and the same matter. Because me personally, I'm more of a hands-on learning. So for example, as in a math class, you can't just put me in front of a screen and have me write everything down, because we don't all learn the same, and it's just different for us, and not everyone knows that, not everyone acknowledges that. Even when you try to tell them, they can't really do much about it, so they don't really know, And yeah, they also have, I feel like teachers sometimes show favoritism personally. I've witnessed it with not only just myself, I've witnessed it with other students, with even special ed students. I see during the halls, during the lunchroom, the teachers just being just not, you know, not very like affectionate. And it's, I can't really, how do I put it into words? I'm not really sure. Like, for example, like in the lunchroom, I've seen, you know, some of the nonverbal special ed students that can't really say like they're full, they don't want anymore. And then I see teachers like trying to like force the spoon like in there, like force them to eat the food, and like it's just, it's not right. And I'm not really sure. I'm having like a blank.
Is there anything that you've noticed, that you've seen, that you probably would like to change? If you could have the ability to change it, like what would you have liked to change in your academic education in regards to like teachers and support and things like that?
Well, when like we come to teachers and tell them that things that are happening, if they would actually listen to us instead of just like brushing us off, I feel like they could understand us more. I feel like teachers don't take the time to understand their students. Administrators don't take the time to understand their students. And personally, to throw you in here, my mom, I feel like I went to work with her while she's working, and she takes the time to understand her students. And that's why she has such a great connection with them. And I feel like most teachers and administrators don't take the time to do that. They just go to work and they're just like, oh, I'm at work, I'm just here for the money. And then they just go home, and then they wonder why their students aren't learning. They're wondering why their students aren't opening up to them about things, because students have personal lives. You don't really know everyone's story, situation. I feel like if you took the time to understand your students, you would definitely learn more about them. You would learn why your student isn't able to sit and learn, you know, at the same pace, why some of them are moving around, because some students have ADHD. You didn't take the time to learn your student to understand that they have ADHD. And it's just, yeah, pretty much, that's basically it, really, that they just need to just open up more to the student so that the student can open up more back to them. And I wish teachers would have really took the time to do that, because I personally feel like some teachers would have knew me better and knew why I act the way that I act because of, you know, if they would have took the time to learn me better. I had one teacher that did that my entire 12 years of going to school. I had one teacher take the time to actually learn who I am as a person. And I feel like that's sad. I feel like teachers should, you know, get more into it, you know?
Yeah.
That's all I have to say, sorry.
Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your voice. It is extremely impactful and powerful to hear from you. We are going to move on. Ladies, if you could please stay near us. We are going to come back to you. I do have a set of questions that I want to run by you. I think they'll be powerful for the folks who are tuning in to kind of hear some of your responses to some of the questions that we have. We also are going to give our participants some time to ask questions of you themselves. So if you could please just stay with us. We still have a lot of time. I think we're keeping a great schedule here. So I don't want you to walk away from us just yet, okay? All right. So for our final panelists, we have Leanna Johnson. Leanna, I'm going to let you take off. I know you said that you got a lot to say, so I want to make sure that you get your time in and you allow us to hear your story. So Leanna, if you're out there, it's your time. It's your floor.
Okay, I am here. Thank you guys for having me. So yeah, my name is Leanna Johnson. I have 3 children. 2 of them are enrolled in RUSD elementary school. My oldest son will be going into 3rd grade, and my second son will be going into 2nd grade. So they're back to back. That's always fun. So my oldest son is special needs. He receives help with reading, speech, I'm so sorry. And my second son, he's pretty average for his learning spectrum. So When my oldest son first started off in RUSD, we kind of experienced similar things like Gabby experienced with her child, just a little more hyper, a little more, energetic. So we kind of brushed it off in 4K. And when he got into first grade, we started to notice more emotional issues. And to be honest, his teacher was not very responsive to my concerns. He would come home upset, but wouldn't tell me. When I would try to communicate with her, I would get brushed off. Oh, he does so great in class. He's just doing so great. He gets along with everybody. Just wonderful. I've always been a very active parent with my kids, going on field trips, trying to be as active as possible, And I got a phone call one day when I was actually on a field trip with my second son. It was from the school social worker. Apparently my son, while in art class, tried to take a pair of scissors and harm himself. I was on the school bus when I got the phone call, and I broke down. One of the teachers had to come, I didn't know what to do. So when this all unfolded, of course, there was multiple conversations between myself, the administrators, and we were trying to figure out how we can help him. But again, his teacher was he does so great in class. I don't know why this is a problem, and et cetera, et cetera. It took a couple weeks before we found out that my son was being bullied by a group of his peers. And although we kind of knew it in the back of our minds, it was brushed off a lot. And it was a group of girls mainly doing the bullying. And I kind of feel like his teacher was not responsive to it because it was girls and he's a boy, and it's kind of like, oh, they must like you type of vibes. And it hurt a lot that my son was going through this, and I didn't see it at first. And I felt like the teachers did not create that space for everyone to share, this situation, and my son did not open up for months about everything that was going on. And we had to get help with the on-site psychologist. He started seeing her weekly, and the social worker to kind of help with his emotional disconnection with his peers. And his learning suffered greatly. His teacher was not very helpful with my concerns on his reading. He is actually still behind about 2 grade levels. He reads at a kindergarten level still. And he's made great improvements since he started 2nd grade. His teacher, fantastic, helping me with how to teach him. So it was kind of like we had a really rough year with him. And then going into 2nd grade, it just kind of was a whole 180. And I loved it. It really sucks that COVID happened because he was making such great progress. So, but my second son is Mr. Popular in his classroom. He likes to start the trouble and stir the pot. He's gotten real familiar with the office, unfortunately, because he just likes to act out. He saw my oldest son getting a lot of attention because of what he was going through. So being a child, he acted out, and his teacher was not very understanding of that either. She kind of was like, well, we're going to have to figure out something, he's doing this in class. And she wasn't really, I feel like when I was trying to make a team relationship with her so we can kind of correct my son's behavior, it was like she was going against me in a way. I was trying to push for this, but she was trying to pull this way because it's her classroom, it's her rules, that type of vibe. So very, very rough year for my second son as well. It did not really turn around. I felt like I was still struggling with trying to help my second son with his emotional outburst and his aggression and being upset because he's not getting the same attention as his brother. And it's very hard to deal with the children while working and not being able to devote as much time to them. So when I decided to get more involved with the school and I joined the Kofi Parent Leadership Group, it's basically where we do more community engagement. we try to get more parents to be involved with the school and like kind of create like a force so that the children see like, hey, your parents are here for you, and we're going to do what we can to make sure that, you know, the school is a great place for you. I felt like doing that, I was able to get more involved, and my kids were proud to see me there with them, and the teachers kind of saw me in a new light. And when I started to pop up at the school all the time because I was doing stuff, you know, trying to volunteer my time, they started to treat me different. Like, you know, the teachers, we had a different relationship at that point. So I feel like if I would have stayed in this light of, I'm a working mom, this is all I can focus on, my children would have been swept under the rug continuously. But the fact that I was able to get more involved with the school, they're more like, oh, she's a parent that cares. I cared before, I just didn't have as much time. That doesn't mean that my kids were not more important then, but it's like, if I can't give you this much time because I have to work and I have to provide for my kids, that shouldn't make my kids less important. You know what I mean? And a lot of parents I know feel the same way that I do about not being able to give as much time as they may like because they have to work, they have to do this kind of stuff. And I feel like the teachers don't get that fully. That, you know, a lot of us want to do more, we just can't. I'm very fortunate that I have been able to do more, and I hope to continue to do more, but my kids are doing a turnaround right now, and I hope it continues after all this COVID stuff is done and we can go back to life as it was. So that's all I have to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I truly appreciate your words. I want to say to everybody, all four of you ladies who presented your stories today, that I am honored to be able to hear your truth and speak and allow you to give you a platform to be able to speak your truth, because I think it's very powerful for educators to hear directly from the source. A lot of times what happens is we may talk to each other, but we never really engage parents as fully as we should be. I think it's one of the things that we lack, not only in Racine, but across the country, as far as engaging parents in the work that we do within our classrooms. The value of your voices and engaging your children cannot be measured in any way, shape, or form. And as you all have seen, and we've all heard today, is that regardless of where your child is or academically or behaviorally, from what I could gather is that you've all felt as if you've really almost shared the same story. You've had very similar experiences regardless of where your kid went to school, how old your children are. Gabby and Leanna, your children are in elementary school right now. Tanisha is at 4 graduates, and yet and still the story isn't different. When you look at, as we talk about this and we look at the complexity of education, the fact that we can have panelists speak on the spectrum of the K-12 experience and still be able to almost share the exact same story is very powerful to me in the work that is being done here today, and why it's important that we hear from our parents. Because if we are going to change, if there's going to be a paradigm shift in the way in which we engage students, it comes from their parents. They are the first person, they are the best person to talk to, who knows their child. These are the women, these are the people who, in order for us to move forward and engage in their children, we must bring into the fold. They must be a part of the educational process. We cannot do this alone. And what concerns me a lot of times is that what I do hear from educators, and that includes sometimes my own teachers who I have to speak to, is that the parents aren't engaged and parents don't want to be a part of this, or this parent didn't come to teacher conference, or whatever the case may be. As we've heard from Leanna, it's not always a possibility. We are in a different situation as educators, potentially to be able to be home with our children when they get off of school, where a lot of our parents, including my own mom, was going to work when I was coming home from school. And when that's the case, they cannot always engage in activities at the time that a lot of times that they're available. When we have teacher conference, a lot of times these teacher conferences are happening when parents are going to work. And it is the parents that we need to talk to that are more than likely the parents who have not stopped working since COVID started, right? These are essential workers. These are the parents of our children who we have, one, fallen out of favor with in some perspective, but also we lose the voice because we aren't as understanding in our way in which we engage them. And that's valuable to me if we are to make a shift in education, but specifically here in Racine. Like, if for me, we can't always expect parents to come across that bridge if we're not willing to meet them halfway. And that is valuable to engaging people in the building of a community, and not just a school community, but a community overall. We have to be very understanding of what is going on with families, and understanding that specifically our teachers may not come from the same environment, or may not come from the space that their students come from. So I know here in Wisconsin alone, about 89 to 91% of the teachers in Wisconsin are middle-class white women. And if you know anything about the state of Wisconsin, the majority of its citizens live in the southeastern or the central portion, the south central portion of the state. With that being said, if you were to think about the spectrum that our teachers come from here in the state of Wisconsin, and the majority of teachers here in the state of Wisconsin are homegrown, the experience that they've had are going to be very different than the experiences of the children who they engage in, specifically those teachers who are engaging children in urban environments here in the state of Wisconsin. Well, we know that the majority of our teachers, around 79% of our teachers, come from rural or suburban Wisconsin. It's a very different paradigm when you think about who you're engaging versus the what you're used to. And that is something that we have to be mindful of. So I'm extremely thankful for the words of all four of you today. And I want to be able to ask you a couple questions. I think that this will be valuable to our participants here today to hear specifically from you. And what I'm thinking is we'll go kind of in order to answer these questions, if that makes sense, ladies. So we'll go Gabby, Tanisha, Michaela, and then you, Leanna, if that's okay. Okay. So the first question that I have for you all, and you'll start us off, Gabby, is simply, what are some assumptions that teachers have made about your family or your children that you believe that they've made about your family or your children?
Unmute. Okay. Well, it's been quite a few assumptions. Even just by them coming out and saying it, a lot of them assumed that I was a single mother of my children, because anytime it came to something with the school, all they seen was me. They never seen my husband. Not understanding, like, he's always at work. You know, I'm able to come only because my employer is more flexible and my boss is more willing to let me go, versus a factory job where you can't go nowhere. So we had that assumption before, and it was actually outspoken to me before, and it was like, oh, it must be a lot on your plate. You have all these kids by yourself, and you have one that's in special education. And I'm like, I'm married. We come from a 2-parent household. It's a whole family thing, but you know, dad is never here because his job doesn't permit him. So that instantly, just because you always see the one parent, the mother, just assuming like, oh, she's a single parent, like there is no male in the picture, had that assumption before. In IEP meetings, for instance, my first couple of them, it was assumed that I was uneducated, that I had no idea what I was talking about when I was asking, what is his achievement gaps? Where is, like, when I started talking, I guess you could say, their language, it kind of shocked them, because they were throwing all this different jargon, you can say, at me, pretty much thinking, well, like she don't know like this is gonna fly with her. And I'm like, no, my child's not going to self-contained. No, like, this is a manifestation. And comp serve, when I started talking what they were talking, it kind of changed their perspective. But them having that assumption of me being a single parent, there's no father in the picture, she's uneducated kind of thing, because you're using all these terms, but you're not explaining anything to me, you know. And that was something that stuck out. Like, this is how parents are being treated a lot of times in some of these meetings. Nothing is being explained to them or broken down for them to where they can understand it or put two and two together. It's just, you know, a constant go of all these big words. Like, and when parents like me work, I honestly have 3 jobs, you know, so it's like, I don't have time to go look and seek resources and do all this. Like, I didn't have time to do. Like, I did it because it involved my child, but a lot of parents don't. So it was just like those assumptions was the ones that stood out, and they were honestly like probably some of the most insulting ones I've had, honestly.
Thank you. Tanisha.
Hello. Basically, Mrs. Pfeiffer said everything in a nutshell, that exact same thing. For me, as like I said, a parent in the district and then an employee, as a parent in the district, I always felt like they weren't willing to work with me. They weren't willing to compromise. They weren't willing to understand. They were very impatient. They were not as quick to respond to text, emails and things of that nature. And then when I became an employee of the district, and then I'm saying, send my email to .rusd.org, all of a sudden I'm getting responses like this. Why was that not before? And the thing about it that was so crazy is that once I became an employee of the district, my oldest child was leaving. And so as I'm seeing some of the things that are happening, the things that are going on, I'm like, oh, so now I can relate to understand what she's talking about. But Mrs. Pfeiffer said everything in a nutshell. I am a single parent, and I was just treated like I had a third eye and an extra nostril. Like, I am no different and no foreign than you. So why are you looking at me and treating me this way? Because you see a young African-American woman with 4 children, you automatically assume every stereotype and every bias that is known to man. You want to label me. You want to put that on my shoulders. Why are you trying to weigh me down with your biases and your ignorance and your lack of my story? Just like my daughter said, no one ever took the time to ask me my story and ask me any questions about it. And even as a parent whose children have now graduated from the district, no one asked me, how did you do it? What tips can you give to other parents? What this, what that, what that? Nothing. You know, and once I became an employee, just like Mrs. Pfeiffer said, the language changed. They started treating me different. I became Miss Nguyen. You wanted to hear what I had to say. You wanted to work around my schedule. But before, it wasn't about me. But now, it's all about me. Okay, so let's take that same energy and make it about my children. Let's take that same energy and make it about the situations at hand. That's what my experience was.
All right. Thank you. Michaela, obviously it's a little different because you don't have children. Right. Okay, but what are some assumptions that you feel that people may have had about, say, you, your brother, even your mom? What are some assumptions you think teachers have had about you over the course of your K-12 experience?
Well, a very big assumption that has been like through my whole life is they assume just because, like, when they see my mom, they see she's a single parent trying to make it happen for her children, that she just doesn't know what she's doing. And that part just doesn't sit with me very well. It really makes me mad. So that's why I felt like I had to, you know, put my foot forward, like, no, I got this, like, got to prove you right. And then I feel like, and another assumption is because people think, like, if you get to know me, I have like a very outgoing personality. I'm a little shy right now, but I have a very outgoing personality, and teachers see me in the class, like giggling and having fun. They just assume that I'm some type of delinquent and I don't know what I'm doing, when all in all, I can code switch. I can turn it off and be that student, sit down and very professional with it. And that's another one
Your brothers?
Yeah, and my brothers, my twin assumptions people have of him is because he has a little temper. So people think that he's just some like wild, like Tasmanian, like, but he's really not. Like, and people, again, like I was saying previously, they don't get to know people to understand, why they act the way they do. And yeah, they see the pants hanging and they just think like, oh, he's just some reckless, like, hood, and he's not. He's definitely not. He's far from it, actually. So yeah, that's
very far from it.
Thank you, ladies. Leanna, same question. What are some assumptions that you feel teachers may have had about you or your children?
Very similar answers to Tanisha and Gabby. One other thing was, as a single mother, when my kids started off school, I was very willing to be involved, but I feel like they assumed that because I was a single mom and I was working a full-time job, that I wouldn't want the phone calls about, my son's behavior and outbursts, as I stated when I was speaking earlier. Like, they just kind of brushed it away. That was a big assumption and a very wrong assumption, because I had to tell them multiple times, like, call me. I don't care if I'm at work. I'll leave in a heartbeat. It's my kid. I don't care. One other assumption they made about my children, my boys are not the same skin color. So one big assumption was always they're not even related. My son actually, when my second son started school, he took off towards his brother like the first couple weeks of school. And one of the teachers actually had grabbed him, like, just to slow him down from running. It was like, no, go with he's like, that's my brother. And the teacher was like, where? Because, they're one's extremely light skinned, the other one's extremely dark skinned. So that's a really bad assumption that they made. But it has happened on several occasions for the teachers who don't know that my children are brothers. So
my next question is for you, Leanna. We'll keep that with you, and we're gonna go from there. And it's just an addition to the question I just asked, and it's simply, how do you feel like those assumptions have affected your children?
Well, to continue off what I was just saying about my boys being assumed that the teachers assuming they're not brothers. It did kind of open up questions that my kids had about, like, why they were different colors. So we had that conversation very early, which it was pretty smooth. It happened pretty smoothly. But the assumptions about with not wanting to get the phone calls while I was at work and stuff. The question was, how did that affect my children, right? As I was
correct.
I know that my oldest son had asked me on a couple occasions, why didn't I come get him from school when he was feeling sad? And it was because mommy was at work. I had to keep telling him mommy was at work. And so that's what really got to the point where I was pushing the teachers, sending them messages on the class dojo, like, how was his day today? Like, does he need a call? It got to the point also where they would let him step out of the classroom to give me phone calls just to control his anxiety. It did cause some real bad problems with anxiety for him. So that took a couple months of pushing them to stop assuming that I did not want phone calls. So.
Thank you. Tanisha, same question. How do you feel like some of these assumptions overall may have affected your children's experience, their K-12 experience?
Well, I can think of one example. When Malcolm was this past school year, actually, he was in class and the teacher had asked a question, and Malcolm, who was Michaela's twin brother, he went to answer the question, and the teacher said, I wasn't talking to you. And Malcolm was like, what do you mean? You asked a question, I raised my hand, and now there's this battle, right? And Malcolm is growing as a young man now to where he knows you cannot give these type of responses because people blew up. So I get a call from the principal and I can hear my son in the background and I can hear her, but they know now. I said, let me talk to him. Malcolm gets on the phone. He's like, Mom, they're not listening to me. They don't care. They're not listening. And I'm like, listen to me, son. I'm listening. Tell me what happened. And he's telling me the story and I'm able to tell him, okay, now tell me what you could have done different. He's like, all right, Mom, I could have probably, yes, you could have probably done that. You could have probably done that. You could have probably done that. And I'll point out where, as a professional, where I see the teacher was unprofessional. But those assumptions, I would have to talk my children down from those assumptions. No, you're not ignorant. You are very educated. You have to understand you're considered a threat. What do you mean? Because you're young, you're gifted, and you're Black. Okay? My children, they excelled in high school. They made the grades. They did a good job, all of them, all 4 years. To where my oldest daughter now has a degree in psychology from UW-Parkside. Like, I was determined to make sure that my children, you are not going to degrade or demean my child and have my child walk around like this because of the assumptions that you want to place on their shoulders. Not here, not today, and not with Team Win. We're not doing that over here. Team Tanisha, we're not doing that over here. Like, no, we are not. So I had to work to remove those assumptions off of my children.
All right. Michaela, how has, or do you believe assumptions personally have affected you?
Personally, the assumptions in the moment, you know, they break you down because it's like, you don't even know me. You can't make these assumptions of me. You don't even know who I am as a person. You don't know my life, so you can't just say these things. But personally, I take the assumptions and I use them as fuel. Oh, you think that I can't do this? Well, I'm going to show you that I can. And that's just that.
Thank you. Gabby.
Unmute. Okay.
So how do you think some of these assumptions have affected your children's K-12 experience?
Well, for my one who's special education, it caused him to shut down. And he talks a lot in therapy because he's like still ongoing with his therapist. He talks a lot about like, how come people think this about me, or how come people think that about me, or how come teachers just assume that I'm bad, or when I'm walking out the classroom, how come they just assume that I'm gonna like run out the building and things like that, them not knowing that it's actually built in his IEP that he is allowed to have like 3 breaks outside of the classroom. So just those type of things, like he still talks about that. So it affects him. I feel like he's getting a better understanding of it now, of kind of what's going on, because he's getting older now since school has been out and maturing a little bit more. And plus things have been explained to him in a different way so he could understand kind of what's going on there. For my other son, who is 9, it's kind of like Michaela thing. It like fuels him. Like he gets like eager and pumped up to like prove you wrong. He feel like it's like him against the world. But at the same time, it does leave him coming home asking questions. And it leaves me like, wait, where did you get that from? Like, who said that? What happened? You know, and me kind of putting together something happened there. But like it pumps him up, but he still does have the question. And then it puts me in a situation as a parent, like, how do I explain this? Because I wasn't ready for this question this young. I was thinking maybe about next year. That would be coming my way, but it's coming a tad bit earlier. So yeah, it's been one of those, like it'll pump one, but then he got the questions. And then the other one, it's just, I think because of his disability and where he's at mentally, actually, like, that's why it has more of an emotional effect on him, you know, and things gotta kind of be explained very differently and kind of delicately, but still like honest, because he can like tell when you kind of like sugarcoating stuff. So he's like, no, Mom, that's not the full truth. And I'm like, it is today, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how it has affected them, and then like affected me, because here I am trying to fix it all and solve it all and make it all make sense for them.
Thank you. So thank you, ladies, for being able to answer my questions. I have a few more, but I'm gonna kind of put them to the side right now. We have some participants who have been listening to us over the course of the past about an hour or so, and we want to be able to give them an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have of the panel. So participants out there, if you got any questions for us, feel free to ask them now, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as honestly as possible.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. Participants, you can put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and the panelists can answer them. Andre, while they're doing that, if you want to ask one more question, it'd be great.
I think one of the biggest questions I have is, ladies, do you feel like at any point in time, so Gabby, that maybe the way in which a teacher has engaged your child has affected their trajectory in school?
Yes. We had that actually his first grade year. And basically it just made his willingness and wanting to learn go completely down. Like, it took all of his drive and wanting to do better, and like it just took it all away from him. And it was like, okay, now from that he deals with low self-esteem about himself. So a lot of times it's this constant of him talking down on himself, like, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, like, and it drives me nuts, because I'm like, no, you're really smart, and I'm trying to put it back in him. But even though like that was first grade and now he's like in the third grade, it still has like lingered this whole entire time. And I feel like it just added more, like a whole nother layer on to his disability. And almost like an anxiety, like a PTSD almost type of thing, like where he can't let it go. So yeah, it really took his ambition and wanting to learn, it took it. So now we just constantly fighting to get it back, and to tell him, like, you know, that was in the past, Aaron, like, you know, let's try to focus on today, because we were there at that time, but now we're here. Look how hard you worked to get where you know, just that constant trying to keep him motivated to learn and wanting to learn, trying to get that back, because that took it like all away. So
thank you. Ladies, before you answer the question, I want to answer some of the questions ask some of the questions that our participants have asked. So I have a question from Anna Zalewski, I believe that's how you say it. She says, I want to reach out to parents and students before the school year in order to understand their stories, as several panelists mentioned. Do you have any recommendations for survey questions? Also, what do you think about socially distanced home visits? I don't want to invade anyone's privacy or make anyone feel uncomfortable.
I love this question. Oh, I'm sorry.
What I will say personally is that from a home visit standpoint, I think that's going to be up to each school district's expectation. You know, how much they want you to physically engage with families within your community may be something that is up to your boss or your district or your principal, or if you are an administrator. I think it's a decision that you're going to have to make for yourself. I know that I've already had some of my staff actively asking me if it's okay if they go see some of their students. Some of them haven't asked, they've just went and seen, because that's who they are. They love their kids, and they're going to go and engage with their students, kind of regardless of what I tell them, even if you know, I don't agree with it all the time. But they've actively went out, and that's the decision that they've made for themselves. And I think that the families who they've built these relationships with are okay with that. So that's a part of the question that I'll answer. Tanisha, I know you wanted to respond to it. So do you have a response to that question?
Yes, I think the question should be geared towards Tell me about your child. What triggers your child? What do you do to calm your child? How do you relax your child? What is your child like? What does your child don't like? What does your child do in their free time? What does your child do in their spare time? Honestly, it should look like, you know, those questions they ask for those dating services things? Not that I know, because I don't go to those websites, but you should ask those type of questions. You want to get to know the child through the eyes of the parent. Don't just assume. Get questions that are going to be geared towards open-ended questions are going to engage and cause you to have more of a conversation. You know, what is your home environment like? What do you guys do together as a family on the weekends? Like, get to know them.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Yes, get to know them. You should be able to look at that paper and read it and be like, oh, okay, now I understand little Timmy a little bit better. So not only go engage and spend time with him, because I know Timmy likes Pokemon cards, but hates blue. Like, you know what I'm saying? But you come with a blue shirt, he hates blue.
To build that relationship.
Build that relationship. Get to know them.
Open up more. If you build the bond, they're not going to open up to a stranger.
Exactly. Build the bond. Get to know them. Open up. Talk to them. Engage them. Ask them questions. Ask those parents questions. And then not only the kids, ask the parents questions too. What stresses you? What types of things do you do in your free time? What do you do when you're not being a parent, which I don't think we ever are not being a parent. Mm-hmm. But if you get what I'm saying, like, get to know the family in its entirety and make sure the questions are not too lengthy. Try to ask questions in a short panel, like in a short page. Don't come with a booklet. Mm-hmm. Because if I got to do this, I'm going to be like, you know what? Nope, I don't even, nope, forget it. One sheet, like 6, 7 key questions that you really, really, really want to know, and just focus on that. And you'll get what you need right then and there.
Thank you. Michaela, you know, to kind of add in, someone wants to know, Darren Lippman wants to know, what is one thing that you believe teachers can do better to get to know their students? And how might this differ if our schools are online?
Well, I feel like if the schools are online, it's kind of harder to get to know someone because, you know, it's easier to be like face-to-face, one-on-one. But you can make it work if you're really determined. But I feel like it's very simple. If you see your student, you know, just, you know, being like laid back, they're like this, with especially the hood. The hood, I swear, teachers don't know the hood. If they got that hood up and they're just like this, you can tell they're not feeling it. You know, they're just having a bad day. You just ask them, hey, are you okay? How you feeling? You want to talk about it? And half the time they'll be like, yeah, can I just step out? Can we just talk? Or if you're online virtually, if you want to Zoom, you know, one-on-one, we can have that one-on-one conversation. It's all about, you know, one-on-one with your students. Because I know teachers have like, you know, like 30, I don't know, however many students, but if you're really determined about your job, if you really want to make a change and a difference, get to know your students, get to know them, and they won't, you know, it's easier to open up to your teacher than your parent. No offense, Mom, not like, cause you know, like not all kids, you know, just open up to their parent. Right. Like if they're sad, like her son, like Leanna's son, he was getting bullied. He just wasn't, you know, he just wasn't feeling like, I don't know how to put the word. I don't want to be like, he just wasn't comfortable. And I'm not saying that he's not comfortable. I don't want to like, it's not my words, but like.
Oh, she's right. She said, you're right.
Yeah, I'm just saying like, if he had that teacher that saw the difference, because you can see the difference in your student, you're with them every single day, you can tell the difference in the behavior and the body language. If a teacher would have took the time, he could have opened up to the teacher, and the teacher, hey, Leanna, your son, he's having a problem with other students, you know, treating us some type of way, and that's just that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the questions, and I'm going to kind of not run through some of these questions, but I want to make sure that we try to answer as many questions from our participants as we possibly can. But another question that came through, Catherine, I think it's Picha, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, is why do you think there's a bigger pressure on young men to behave in a certain way compared to young women? And this is what I'll say. Every one of these women who've spoken about their children have spoken on behalf of their African-American male their sons. And as an African-American male in the United States, and someone who obviously had to go through this system himself at some point in time, that there is and I want to be very fragile when I say this in a sense, because but I gotta be honest as I can, is that there is a misconception about African-American males in this country that has existed since the day that that slavery was, that we were emancipated. And the reality of this situation is that that narrative, as my wife would say, has permeated the lexicon, or has permeated the culture of America significantly. So when you specifically talk about African American males, and let me be clear that a lot of males of color struggle with this idea of behavior, and that when you look at over representation of African American males or people of color in special education, typically it's not because they have some learning disability, but it is because of a so-called behavioral disability. There is a cultural disconnect that happens in this country. And again, it goes back to what is the power of having a very diverse staff on hand, which is something that I specifically do every place I've ever been as an administrator, is to try to diversify the staff. Because what happens when you diversify your staff is that you give people an opportunity to see people in a different light and to have those communication with their colleagues that they typically are probably not having at home or in the communities in which they live with people of color. And you get a very different view than the one that is thrown at us from the media, thrown at us from our own families, thrown at us from even through our school and the experiences that we have and that we see. And so when you come in with these preconceived notions, or when you come in with these biases that you may not even know you have, you tend to look at African American male or students of color behavior as something that needs to be corrected, and not something that, because it's something that you're not technically used to seeing on a regular basis if you're not someone of color. And so that's why I feel like when these women speak, they for the most part have spoken about behaviors that teachers were seeing of their own children or of their sons, and not necessarily from their daughters as well. And trust me, Michaela's a problem too. Another question that came in was, a teacher is asking, hi, I'm a teacher in a comprehensive autism unit, and so all of my students have special needs. I'm trying to brainstorm ways to make virtual learning more accessible for them, especially when their parents work or have other duties during the day. Do you have any tips or ideas that would make it easier for you as a parent or a student with special needs? What could his teacher do to make his learning more accessible or easier for him? As a parent? This is a long question. So she said, I'm wondering how I can best support my students and their parents during virtual learning, and how to make it the least stressful as possible. And what I will say, Jessica, is I think that we're all are in this process together. This is so extremely unprecedented across the world, but specifically in the United States, that none of us at this point in time really have a very clear visual of what this is supposed to look like, and how to best benefit students. But I will go back to something that was said earlier from, I think, Tanisha, and as someone who has a nonverbal son with autism, I would tell you that knowing the needs of that family is going to be extremely important in how you develop lesson planning around the needs of those students. And in order to do that, you're going to have to be actively engaged and build a plan of action around how you're going to support each one of them individually. Now, some of my teachers here have sent me, schedules already and saying, hey, because we have a number of units here that deal specifically with students with high needs, like autism. And they're saying, can I, instead of doing this as an overall class session, is it possible if we engage students an hour at a time individually so that we can give them our entire attention during that time frame, instead of trying to engage multiple students at one time in any content area? And from my standpoint, it's like, yes, we're going to do it regardless of what the state says, because we have to do what makes sense for kids in this moment. And that's what you're going to have to look for. It's going to be impossible for us to really give you answers, but to answer to that, but I think you're going to have to really look into how you actively engage with the students that you service and their families. Let me see. One more question. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we'll try to get one more question answered. I've got what I have here is a lot of positive feedback for all of you ladies here. And I just want to read something here that says, I just want to say how strong and inspirational you women are. My heart hurts that you have experienced any negative interactions. As a teacher of 14 years, I do my best to treat my students and as parents, as partners. If anything, I've been criticized for communicating too much, both positive and negative. Please know that I find your words and experiences inspirational to help me focus my interactions for the coming school year. Jennifer Adams. Thank you. Here's one from a college student. I'm a college student working towards becoming a teacher. Can you think of, or do you believe there should be more different requirements in regards to diversity and inclusion in teacher preparation programs? Kay, I love you for answering this question. We don't have the 3 hours that I would really want to answer this question. What I will say is, when I was working on my dissertation, which I have not completed, I've been ABD for quite some time, Dr. Reese, I know, I see you giving me a thumbs up. But my dissertation question was exactly what you're talking about. Is what I was looking at was how, how teacher education programs were preparing its students to work in diverse and urban environments, and what programs were doing across the state of Wisconsin specifically that engaged their students in these hands-on experiences. And I don't know, Kay, where you're from. I know here, students typically aren't really in a classroom until they're doing their field study and or when they're doing their student teaching. And typically that happens their last year in the classroom as a college student. And I think that is, to me, the wrong way to go about it. And so when I looked across the state of Wisconsin, I looked at a lot of their TEP programs. What I did see was a lot of them that lacked diversity, inclusion, conversation, and discussion. And if they had courses on it, those courses weren't mandatory, but those courses were optional for teachers to take. And I think it does teachers, pre-service educators, a disservice because any state, I don't care where you are, the majority of the teaching positions that will be available are typically going to be in urban environments. And they're going to be in places that a lot of teachers may or may not have grown up in. So if they don't have that experience, if they haven't kind of walked that journey through the entire course of their experience as a education candidate, I think that we as universities could be potentially doing a disservice to students. And a program like what's happening here at UW-Milwaukee is extremely beneficial to developing partnerships with school districts and families and building a true understanding of what it means to be an actively engaged educator from the moment that you walk out of a TEP program. So, Kay, I love the question, and I think that more than anything, that is where this all should be starting, is at that level. And my wife, who was an educator and is probably on this as a participant here, one of the first things that she ever told me when she was a first-year teacher, she actually was a teacher, an educator before I became an educator, is that she felt like she was done a disservice because a lot of the things that she ended up going through and learning about the families and the students that she supported was something that she had never experienced as a pre-service educator. So if anything, I think that is the most valuable question that I could have gotten today, because I think that is an important thing for a number of universities across the country to really pay attention to. So unfortunately, we have a little bit of time left here. I don't really know how to close this out. I don't really do panels, but what I want to close it out for you. Oh, Denise is running this thing. Okay, Denise.
All right, so last thing, any last words from any of the panelists? Anybody have anything they'd like to say to encourage teachers or future educators?
Yeah.
I would like to say,
no, go ahead. No, you go first. I'll go after you.
I was just gonna say, you guys just keep an open mind with going into this school year and with the students that come into your classroom, whether it's just virtually or you get a chance to have some direct contact, and being mindful of the families and also what they're going through during this time. and keep it foremost, like, it's all about the child. So I feel like those are some of the things, but I feel like at least you guys are here and in attendance, so it shows like you guys are taking a step in the right direction, you know, and wanting to change some things and to do better.
Thank you. If I can just add real quick, as Gabby said, you guys being here is definitely like a show of your willingness to like listen and let us be heard. Your parents can be your best friends, you know, when it comes to these students. I have formed great relationships with my kids' teachers, and honestly, I think it made my child's relationship with their teacher a lot better, knowing that mommy is best friends with Miss So-and-so, you know. So definitely understand that every child is different. Every child's gonna have their own story. Do your best to understand them. Do your best to understand that the parents are going through things as well. And if you're having a rough day, it's okay. We're all human. Just having that relationship, that open communication, we can get a lot more done together.
And understand that, look at it like this. A library is full of a bunch of different books that all have beautiful different stories to tell. You have to look at your families those same way, okay? You have to get to know them, take the time to listen to them, take the time to understand them. And if you don't understand, it's okay to find someone that you trust and ask, because I wouldn't want you to go in with a misconstrued view of what it's supposed to be like, right? So just understand that this is a really trying time for a lot of families, really trying time. And a lot of this is all new for everybody. These parents are not used to, I cannot imagine having to have all 4 of my kids at home out the blue, just here they go. It's like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? So understand that. Understand also during this time that a lot of families had to probably move in with somebody or something like that. So there's a lot of stress there. Understand that their learning environment may not look like this student's learning environment, or it may not look like that student's learning environment. But take the time to, number one, listen, care, and if you just do those 2 things, you'll build those relationships, you'll build that trust to where, like Leanna and Mrs. Pfeiffer said, parents will want to talk to you, and they'll want to engage with you, and they'll want to trust you, because that's what it's about.
Great. And the baby.
And the baby. Yeah, no. Yeah, go ahead. But yeah, like she was saying, just take the time to understand people and take the time to understand that everyone's, you know, we're all just trying to survive, really. That's it. This is new to everyone. We all don't understand. And that's, yeah, pretty much it. Just take the time, just be calm. Just be calm. That's it. Just be calm.
And understand this is all new for everybody. And like the previous beautiful, wonderful lady said, the fact that you're here and you showed up shows that you want to do something different. And the change has got to start here, and you came, so let's make that change, right? Yeah.
Andre and Jill, do you have any last comments as well before we close out? Either of you? Okay. Andre, he looks a little frozen. I can't tell. Okay. Do you have any last comments before we close out?
You know, I will simply say, just I want to thank all of the panelists for being honest and open and really sharing their stories today. I think it was very powerful in getting this message across to specifically pre-service educators, but to all educators out there, the value of communication with our families. As educators, we cannot do the work that we do without the partnership and the collaboration of the family. And as a person of color in Wisconsin, and with some of the things that we know we're seeing, unfortunately, was identified as one of the worst places to raise an African-American child in the country. So as a district, we are actively working to do better for our families here, but we also understand this is a community effort. And I think regardless of where you're from, it is not only the job of the school district, but the job of the community to uplift its citizens. And so it doesn't necessarily start with us, but we have a big hand in the work that needs to be done. So if you're in education and you're a part of this call, I appreciate the work that you do wholeheartedly appreciate the work that you do. And on behalf of all of our families across this country, thank you for the work that you do and the work that you will attempt to do as we move forward here during this time. Thank you.